We're now ready to start to talk about logic in a formal sense. And partially we mean that as formal, like it wears a suit and tie, but to a greater extent we mean in terms of the form. In order to do that, we're going to need to be able to look at the forms that logic takes. Now, in algebra, when we're looking at forms, we're working with numbers, but then we take away the numbers and represent them with letters. In logic, we're not working with numbers. We're working with what are called statements. Now, it's easy to know what a number is. 7 is a number. What's a statement? So a statement is a sentence that can be either true or false. It's something you can look at and say, is that true? Is that false? So there are lots of sentences that are not statements. Examples might include questions, like, what time is it? Imperatives, or commands, like, turn to page 378. And exclamations, like, oh no! Those aren't statements. You can't look at that and say that is true or that is false. We also have some things that look like statements but aren't really. Right? So you can have something that has the form of a statement. The number 7 melts at 35 degrees Celsius. That's nonsense. We can't say what it means for a number to melt. And we also have sentences like, this sentence is false, that are paradoxes. This can't be either true or false because, well, if it's true, if it really is the case that this sentence is false, then the sentence is false. But if the sentence is false, if it's really not true that this sentence is false, that would make it true. And so that means it can't be either. We can also have sentences that are just not well defined. They're poorly defined. We can't tell if they're true or false because it's hard to say what they mean. For example, Yellow Submarine is the best Beatles album. What does it mean for something to be best? This sentence involves an opinion, and it's very subjective. It's a very subjective sort of opinion. It's really hard to say whether it's true or false. We could make that into a statement by defining the terms, by saying what we mean by best. So we might say, Yellow Submarine is Alice's favorite Beatles album. We don't know whether it's objectively good or not, because we haven't defined what good means. But this is a sentence that is either true or false about Alice. Or we might say, Yellow Submarine sold more copies than any other Beatles album. And that sentence we could decide whether it was true or false by looking up the sales data. So when we have an ambiguous sentence, we can define our terms or make it more specific and turn it into a statement. Now, I'm telling you this now, but I'm also going to confess that when we study logic, we sometimes admit really ambiguous statements like John is tall. And we assume that they're clearly defined somewhere. So somewhere we have a specific definition of what it means to be tall. Maybe taller than 5'10" would be our specific definition of what is tall. And then if John meets that definition, we'll say John is tall. But for purposes of working with the logic, we'll just assume that that somewhat ambiguous sentence is clearly defined somewhere in the background, so that it definitely is either true or false.